Picture this. You're walking through the bustling heart of ancient Rome. It's the year 67 AD. The air smells of roasted olives, sweat, and incense. A procession cuts through the forum. The emperor himself, Emperor Nero, striding proudly in silk and purple. At his side is a striking young woman, cloaked in shimmering fabrics and dripping in jewels. But something is wrong. The crowd isn't awed. It's horrified, because that woman beside the most powerful man in the world, she was once a boy. His name was Sporus. And what Nero did to him will become one of the most disturbing acts of psychological and physical domination in ancient history. This isn't just another tale of Roman decadence. This is the story of a stolen identity, a love twisted into madness, and a teenage boy transformed into a living ghost, forced to become the dead wife of a broken emperor. If you're fascinated by the hidden truths history tried to bury, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? It still amazes me that across time and space, you and I can connect over a story that happened nearly 2,000 years ago. Let's go back and meet the man who started it all. He wasn't always a monster. When Nero Claudius Caesar first ascended the throne at just 16 years old, Rome didn't fear him. It celebrated him. He slashed taxes, funded lavish public games, even took to the stage himself, Rome's golden boy, playing the part of philosopher king, artist emperor. Some dared whisper, this might be a second Augustus. But power, real, absolute power, has a way of peeling back the layers of civility until only the rawest parts remain. And then she appeared, Poppaea Sabina, beautiful enough to stop time, ambitious enough to use it. She wasn't just a consort. She was a mirror to Nero's ego and a match to his fire. At the time, Nero was already married to Octavia, daughter of a former emperor. But that was politics. Cold, arranged. Poppaea was something else. She laughed too loudly, argued too sharply, dared to look directly at the emperor like she was sizing him up, not worshiping him. And Nero didn't just fall. He spiraled. What began as a scandal soon became an obsession. He exiled Octavia, then had her executed, and married Poppaea in a ceremony so extravagant, the empire trembled under its cost. But devotion turned to possession, and possession turned to madness. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a relic, a living icon, a prize no other man could look upon without fear. He built her a palace, then turned it into a gilded cage. As Rome's golden boy blackened into something darker, Poppaea's role shifted, from muse to possession to the prisoner. And it would only take one moment of defiance to bring their twisted love to a fatal end. They say it started with an argument, just another evening behind the walls of the imperial palace. But by dawn, the Empress of Rome would be dead, and the emperor broken beyond repair. Poppaea was pregnant, carrying what might have been Nero's heir. But power had warped their love. Where once there was fire, now there was fear. Poppaea was the only one who still dared to tell Nero the truth. Some say she criticized his theatrical performances. Others, his obsession with image over empire. But what's certain is this. Nero, divine to his subjects, untouchable to his enemies, could not stomach defiance from the woman he once worshipped. In a fit of blind rage, he struck her. Some say it was a kick to the belly. Others, a violent shove. But either way, it was enough. In that instant, the emperor who commanded 30 legions destroyed the only thing he ever truly loved. He summoned Rome's finest doctors, offering fortunes, threatening torture. But nothing could undo what he had done. Poppaea died within hours. So did the unborn child she carried. What followed was a mourning. It was a collapse. Nero had her embalmed instead of cremated, violating Roman custom. He dressed her corpse in jewels, built her a tomb more elaborate than any Caesar before him. And then he spoke to her. Day after day, he talked to her, held court beside her remains, ordered servants to speak to her in the present tense, as if she were still alive. They left her seat empty at banquets. They toasted her name. They played her favorite songs for a woman who was no longer there. But grief doesn't always fade. Sometimes it transforms. and in the hollow where Poppaea had once lived, Nero found something, someone else to fill the void. He was just a boy, slight, quiet. A palace servant moved through the halls like smoke. His name was Sporus, born into slavery, freed while still young. Sporus had no titles, no ambitions, no enemies. He was invisible until he wasn't. The first time Nero saw him, something inside the emperor clicked. That delicate jawline, the wide, dark eyes. To anyone else, Sporus was just another youth. But to Nero, he looked exactly like Poppaea. Was it grief? Was it madness? Or was it the desperate delusion of a man trying to undo what he had done? In Sporus, Nero saw a chance at redemption, a second Poppaea, a resurrection. And so began one of the most disturbing transformations in recorded history. Nero didn't just want Sporus to dress like a woman. He wanted him remade. He summoned Rome's top surgeons, men whose talents usually served battlefield wounds, and elite gladiators. But this was different. This was mutilation masquerading as medicine. Sporus was cut, altered, changed not to heal, but to erase. The operation was brutal, primitive, and irreversible. No anesthesia, no consent, no escape. By the time he awoke, he was no longer a boy, but not yet something else. They gave him ointments for the scars, but no balm for the identity stolen from him. And then came the preparations. New name, new voice, new rules. He would no longer be Sporus. He would be Sabina, named for the woman he was meant to replace. What Nero had lost in Poppaea, he intended to rebuild, piece by piece. Skin, voice, soul. And Sporus? He became a canvas, painted with the grief, guilt, and madness of an emperor who thought he could rewrite the past. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was theatrical, a role written for a dead woman. And Sporus was cast in the leading part. They taught him how to walk like Poppaea, laugh like Poppaea, breathe like Poppaea. Not even his voice was left untouched. Every day became a rehearsal. Every mirror, a reminder that the boy inside was gone. Then came the wedding. Spring, 67 AD. An imperial wedding, sacred, public, and entirely grotesque. Sporus, renamed Sabina, was paraded down the aisle in full regalia. Gems once worn by Poppaea now clung to his skin. Nero took his hand and called him wife. To the public, it was an act of state. To Nero, a resurrection. To Sporus, a burial of his identity, his past, his future. But the performance wasn't over. It had just begun. He received a household, servants, silks, and silver. Luxury? Perhaps. But it came with surveillance, silence, and the weight of pretending to be someone who never chose to live again. He didn't just love Poppaea. He wanted her forever. And if the gods wouldn't give her back, Nero would make one himself. But how long can someone play dead before they start to vanish for real? Because beyond the palace walls, Rome was changing. Governors whispered rebellion. The Senate stirred. And the man who made himself a god was about to lose everything. The fantasy couldn't last forever. Not even for an emperor. By 68 AD, Rome was cracking. Rebellions flared in the provinces. The Senate turned. Even Nero's Praetorian Guard, his personal shield, declared him unfit to rule. And where was Sporus? Still dressed in Poppaea's silks. Still smiling for crowds who now whispered openly. They fled the capital like fugitives. Not gods. Not rulers. Just two people running from an empire on fire. In a countryside villa, the man who had once commanded the world began preparing for death. Nero couldn't bring himself to do it. He asked others to strike the fatal blow. In the end, he did it himself. And Sporus? He watched. The emperor was gone. But Sporus remained. And now, he was no longer a living doll for one man. He was a symbol, a tool, a prize. First in Amphidius Sabinus, then to Otho, then to Vitellius. Each man treated him as Nero did. Each one is obsessed with the legacy of a mad emperor. And Sporus? He played along. Because in Rome, survival often looked like submission. Until Vitellius planned something worse. A public spectacle. A parody of Persephone's rape. with Sporus at the center. He had endured silence. He had endured transformation. But this would be his final act. Before the day came, Sporus took poison. He died quietly. By his hand, he was barely 20. But in death, he chose something he hadn't been allowed in life: control. In 69 AD, under Emperor Vitellius, the cruelty reached its endgame, a public farce. A performance in the arena meant to mock myth, pain, and personhood. Sporus was cast as Persephone. Rome would laugh as he was humiliated, raped, destroyed before a crowd of thousands. For years, he had been stripped of choice, of voice, of self. But now, at the edge of one final stage, he made a decision no emperor could undo. He took poison and died before the curtain could rise. No applause, no audience, just silence and the final echo of a life stolen. Sporus was no more than 20. History barely remembers his voice, only his suffering. But in the end, he did something none of his masters could. He chose. And in that choice, he reclaimed what they had spent years erasing: his humanity. Sporus was never meant to be remembered. He left behind no writings, no lineage, no monument. And yet his story survives. Not because he ruled, not because he conquered, but because he endured. He was a boy who was turned into a symbol, a performance, a possession. But in the end, he became something more powerful, a reminder that behind every statue, every emperor, every empire, there are human lives shattered in silence. If his name haunts you, let it, because history isn't just marble and myth. It's the people crushed beneath it. If you found this story as haunting and as human as we did, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? It's remarkable that across oceans and centuries, we're still uncovering the voices history tried to erase. You're watching Story Walls, where every forgotten soul deserves to be heard.